The book of Luke, chapter 8, starting with verse 26, and we're going to read through verse 39. I'm not sure what page it is, if you're reading your Bibles. 68, thank you. It's on page 68 in the New Testament. Would you please stand as a physical way of expressing our understanding of the importance of what we're about to read. So verse 26 says this: They sailed to the region of the Gerasenes, which is across the lake from Galilee. When Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. For a long time, this man had not worn clothes or lived in a house, but had lived in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had commanded the evil spirit to come out of the man. Many times it had seized him, and though he was chained hand and foot and kept under guard, he had broken his chains and had been driven by the demon into solitary places. Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, because many demons had gone into him, and they begged him repeatedly not to order them to go into the abyss. A large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside. The demons begged Jesus to let them go into them, and he gave them permission. When the demons came out of the man, they went into the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. When those tending the pigs saw what had happened, they ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone out, sitting at Jesus' feet, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people how the demon-possessed man had been cured. Then all the people of the region of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them because they were overcome with fear. So he got into the boat and left. The man from whom the demons had gone out begged to go with him, but Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return home and tell how much God has done for you." So the man went away and told all over town how much Jesus had done for him. This is the gospel of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Please be seated. I've been teaching for some time. I think it was starting on the Sunday of the Trinity, about God as the Trinity. And it's not easily understood. We have different formulas, doctrines, if you will, creeds of the Trinity, God the Father, Almighty, Creator of heaven and earth, etc., that attempt to help us in understanding our God. But I think that even more important than the creeds is the relationship that each has to each other, because it is in that relationship that we are drawn into. So I've shared before that the Father is so proud of his Son. Look at my son. The very first words we hear in the scriptures as Jesus comes out of the water, "This is my son." You know, if there was a Sears and Roebuck's, Jesus would take a picture and put Jesus on the Christmas card. You know, so proud. And we put pictures of our kids' works on the refrigerator because it's in our human nature to want to be proud of our kids and to love them and to show them off. And it's very painful when they make mistakes. And it hurts when they make bad choices. But nonetheless, love them so much. And that's how God loves Jesus. God doesn't want any of the credit. He just wants everyone to see Jesus. And Jesus, in turn, doesn't want any of the credit. He wants to see everyone to see how beautiful his Father is. And the Spirit does not want credit to himself by doing the spectacular. He wants people to see how beautiful Jesus and the Father are. And so here's this relationship where everyone is kind of trying to take the back seat and say, look how beautiful the other is. And it's in understanding that relationship that we truly understand what it means to be in the presence of God. It's hard in our human nature. We want everyone to look at us. But that's not how it is in the kingdom. It's, wow, look at how beautiful. We get lost in one another. We get lost in one another. And it's something that we desire really, really strongly, to get lost in the other. It's why we pursue romance. It's why we commit. It's why we have families and children, because it's a joy. It is a joy, a true joy, a sacred joy, to get lost in another. Today, as the scriptures unfold, when all is said and done, Jesus says, I just want you to go home. I know this is the most remarkable thing you've ever experienced, but I do want you to go home and just tell everybody how good or how much God has done for you. I don't even want the credit. I don't need the credit. Look at how good God is. And he goes home and tells everybody what Jesus did, you know. And there's an interesting... This story in and of itself is not our ordinary experience. We just don't. And when we read it, we can lose some of the impact that the actual experience had. Here was a man who had been possessed by a spirit. No one could help him. He was beyond help. And his mindset was so tormented that he would just strip himself naked and run, and no one could bind his physical body as well, and he would just run through the catacombs naked. It's very uncomfortable. If you've ever been around, sometimes people that are on medication, and maybe they're not on medication, and they talk just like they're out in outer space, and they don't smell very well, and it's very uncomfortable. And people come to the church every once in a while in that state, and you know what? Let me get the pastor to talk to you, because it's uncomfortable. It really is. We don't know how to handle that many times. And that's the case in this experience, this story. There was a man just like in our day, tormented, and when he sees Jesus, he doesn't have a conversation with him. This is key. He shouts at him. Scripture says that in verse 26, when he saw Jesus, he cried out, fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me?" And that's exactly the kind of dynamic that I want to talk about today in our walk with God. It's not uncommon in our homes today to shout at one another. And there's a reason for that. And hopefully by the end of today, we can experience more of God's peace in such a way that, like the demon-possessed man, we don't have to feel so tormented that we end up shouting at one another. And sometimes our shouting at one another doesn't have to be volume. It can just be sarcastic shouting. But it doesn't solve anything, and it really never resolves anything. All it does is tear down. In the beginning of the Bible, and it pleases me to hear that a number of us are reading it just on their own now. It's a great thing. It means we're being drawn to God in beautiful ways. But in the beginning, in chapter 3, when the serpent comes to talk with Eve and has a conversation, After listening, Eve does, to the voice of the serpent, if you remember the story, she takes of the apple and sees that the apple is desiring as an apple, as a fruit in and of itself, but also to gain knowledge, she bites it. What's left out of that story, because it didn't happen, is a conversation with God about it. She just went off, in our vernacular, half-cocked, and did it. And never had a conversation with the one that loves her the most. Never sat down with the one that had made her the most beautiful. See, when Eve was created, she was the most beautiful of the beings that God had formed. He didn't create her. He created Adam. And he took Eve from Adam. And it's a beautiful, beautiful description of the relationship between a man and a woman. So much so that when the devil comes in to ruin our lives, he attacks that very relationship. And most of the words that we have to cut each other down are words that describe either the sexuality of a woman or the body part of a man. I'll let that sit. It's not degrading at all, but we have made it debased. But what was missing was the conversation with God. I love to talk. I love to talk with people. Because you get to know, and once you get to know someone, they are no longer your enemy or a threat. And God's desire is to have not a distance relationship, but intimate. I've created a world in which I want you to lose yourself, not only in me, but in my creation. I want you to discover everything that I made for you. I want to share that with you. Remember experiencing that in our humanity, that genuine spirituality, expressed sometimes in songs. Well, if there's one thing in my life that's missing, it's the time that I spend alone. I don't know if you know that song, but it's it expresses spiritually our desire to be with God, His creation. But here's the thing. There was no time for Eve. She did not take the time to listen to His voice. And so she went in a direction of voice and voices. It wasn't just one voice. When Eve saw that the apple was desiring for food, and that she wanted it, and it was good for knowledge and evil, and the different messages that the serpent had given her, all these different voices, she just got caught up in it and never bothered at that moment to seek her beloved. And so it's been, from that time on, God chasing after His creation, wooing His creation back. And time again, we listen to voices that keep us away from God. Oh, you can't trust in God. You got to do this on your own. Oh, and all these voices, if they are not of God, carry with them a poison, a destruction that makes the world in which we live in a constant threat. A constant threat. So much so that these voices have convinced us that the greatest threat to us is each other. What a deceptive job. That the beautiful thing of creation. You know, I've been reconnected with some of the people in Southern California, and they're Persian. And the enemy has done such a good job of creating an atmosphere of anger and hatred that two countries can go to war and maim and kill, when the reality is that every single person that I know that's Persian, the most beautiful people I know. We've divided us up into nation states, and all with the intention and deceptive of being able to kill one another. It's bigger than what we can imagine. And the man in this story has been possessed by these, meaning that whatever voices have been inside his head are so strong that he can't break free from their influence. Let's say that again. The voices in his head are so strong that he is unable to break free of their influence, even though he desires so. What does it mean when the scriptures say he has a right mind? It means that he is able, without pressure of outside influences, to make a decision, and to, in the decision-making process, listen to different voices that he is able to have discernment over. Let me say that again. Think of your mind as your house. Do you just let anybody in your house because they want to come in? Now you go to some houses that says no soliciting. Why? Because you don't want someone coming into your house telling you what to do, trying to push something on you. Right? They're not coming in to help you, even if it's a good product. You feel as if they're trying to push something on you. How does it feel when somebody calls you and it's a telemarketer? They're trying to push something on you. And they do it very kindly and gently, but it still feels as if you're being pushed. And if you don't have control over your house as to who comes in and who doesn't, and if you don't have control over your house as to how people behave, most of the destruction that happens in our lives happens in our homes, not outside. Most of the violence that we experience in the world happens in our homes, not outside. And so, in this man's experience, he did not have a physical home. His home, meaning his mind, was so taken over by entities and thoughts and voices that he could not get rid of. Have you ever tried to get rid of a voice before? Ain't easy. You ever get a camel in your house and try to get rid of it? The camel doesn't come in all at once. Just sticks its nose in. What you got going on? I'm just cooking. But don't go any further. Okay. Well, what's over there? Oh, that's, I'm making this over here. But don't come any further. I said don't come any further. Okay. But, ooh. Is that, what is that I smell? Well, okay. Next thing you know, the camel's in and you can't get the camel out. Now, the reason why I'm using this is because, and this is so powerful, our minds. Put on the mind of Christ, Scripture says. The disciples are about learning how to think. Because if we don't learn how to think correctly, we will continue to make the same mistakes over and over and over. And as is commonly understood, the definition of insanity is thinking the same thing and doing it over and over, but expecting something else to happen. So, in this case, Jesus stepped ashore. He was met by a demon-possessed man from that town. For a long time, this man had not worn clothes. This has been happening for a long time. And this is important to understand because how we think, how we come to think, how we think is extremely important. I grew up in church, so I think a certain way that's influenced by that culture. For better or for worse, it influences my life. I grew up in a certain area of the country. It influences how I think, for better, for worse. I grew up, etc., etc. Now, the thing of it is, all of us are experiencing the reality in our lives of conditional thinking. We've been taught and conditioned to think this way. If we're not aware of it, it will, as in the case of this man, possess us. Because it's not something, when you're conditioned to think a certain way, it's not that you chose it. It was impressed upon you. Over time, it leaves an impression that even if the person doing the impressing leaves, the impression remains. If you grow up hearing certain messages about who you are, that impression, regardless if the person giving those messages is still in your life, the impression remains. And you think that, and it can happen on an unconscious level, and it will run your life. That's why it's so important when you look through the scriptures, you see that Jesus many times makes that reality known to his disciples. And there was a time where he was ministering, teaching about the kingdom. And as he's teaching about the kingdom, his mom and brothers show up. And they're like, "Hey, your mom and your brothers are here." And he says, "Who are my mother and my father?" Those who are doing the kingdom. Why does he say that? Because we get our first impressions from our families. If they're healthy, they'll give healthy impressions. If they're not, we'll get destructive impressions. But whatever it is, we pick it up and we carry that the rest of our lives. Same with Jesus. Jesus' mother thought that at that time he was insane, crazy, out of his mind. Okay, this guy is in his right mind. It's very important to understand. Jesus in this story set the man free, giving him a right state of mind where he was calm, dressed, in his right mind. His mother, Jesus' mother, at one time thought Jesus was out of his mind, went to take charge of him, and it was then that Jesus says, "Who are my mother and brothers?" In other words, the impression of the reality of the kingdom supersedes the impressions of what you've been taught as a human being in your life. Doesn't negate them, just says they're greater than. I've met so many people and have experienced in my own life the power of those first impressions. Sometimes the impressions can take place in a vacuum. In other words, if you grow up in a home where there is no father, the absence of one is cause for other voices to come in and tell you who you are in absence of that. And they're destructive. Well, if I was worth something, my dad would have stuck around. And to break somebody free of that conditioned thinking can only be done through the power of God's grace. God's grace is indeed God's favor, to be sure, but it is also an active force that can be called upon in faith to do things that we would never be able to do on our own. And so his grace is available and anew each day of our lives. I breathe by his grace, whether I'm aware of it or not. Now, in this story, the man screams at Jesus because, and this is so key, many times to make an impression in terms of a conditioned voice, you have to use some kind of force. Or you repeat it. Think about making an impression. Think about making an impression. You can come on the scene and just force that impression. You can abuse someone or bless someone, but it's the impression. Or you can do it subtly over a long time. Either or, this man was in bondage to it. And when Jesus came into his kingdom, if you will, this man's kingdom. And actually it wasn't this man's kingdom, it was the demonic kingdom. Jesus was able to see that voice, the origin of that voice, when that voice came into this man's life. Because we come in as a clean slate, and maybe something happens at this age. And I've seen it happen so many times. You can see it sometimes in kids' pictures. They're happy here, and all of a sudden the next grade, and I can tell that something happened between this grade and this grade. And because Jesus walked in the full knowledge of the kingdom, he could see that within people. And as he was setting this man free, the voices themselves that had held this man captive for so long, in an attempt to hold on for dear life, this man's mind screamed at him. Because that's the last vestige. When you've got nothing else, you scream. When all was said and done, these voices, because, let me back up a second. Conditioning is one voice. The other voice is God, our Creator. Our Creator, in creating us, has a voice that speaks to the depths of who we are. Sometimes we're so busy, and it is a trick of this world to keep us so busy that we cannot develop an awareness. I want you to think about this for a second. Jesus had to go into the desert for 40 days all by himself in order to develop the ability, the full ability of listening to his Father. And if Jesus needed to do that, to spend time all alone just in that practice of learning how to listen to his Father, and during his ministry taking out specific times to go listen to his Father, if he needed to do that as a way of developing his spirit to be in tune with his Father, does it not make sense that we require the same thing? But the reality is, we're just too busy. That, in and of itself, is not true. But we are so conditioned. I'll ask people how, I can say, you're not that busy, and then they get defensive. Oh, who are you to tell me I don't want? Because they believe it so much. And I'm not saying we're not busy. Too busy. And see, what happens is that we believe that somehow in listening to God and in pursuing God and in going to Bible studies or just spending time in the Word or spending time in fellowship or spending time quietly listening to God without any of that stuff, we think it, because our thinking has been conditioned such, we think it's just another thing that we have to do and we're already too busy. And that's the natural thing. It's no different than when I teach piano. And I'll teach piano to kids, right? Or sometimes even adults, but it's just about every piano student. They've got time to watch TV and do this stuff, and hey, you're going to practice piano. Oh, I don't want to practice piano. Why? Because it feels as if it's a burden. When the reality is, would you like the opportunity to learn how to play this instrument great? Oh, yeah. Okay. But because we believe it's a burden, we're repulsed by it. When the reality is, when all is said and done, if you would just spend 10, 15 minutes, you would develop a skill, a way of being that you could express yourself so much fuller. It'd be a wonderful thing, but we approach it as if it's a burden. We can approach God the same way. Oh, I don't want to get into the Word again. I'm so busy. What's on TV? And the reality is, it's not a burden. That is a lie. It's kind of like saying, oh, I don't want to eat. Honey, you have to. And so somehow, and this is the key to Jesus, the reason why, by the way, we feel it's a burden, it's not, and this is key, it's not that we feel that we're busy. Busyness is not a bad thing, by the way. It's that the busyness is being driven by the slave master of the voice that says you must hurry. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. And there's no space. There's no space to listen to God. You read through the scriptures and you will see that Jesus is a very busy man. Very busy. But he's never rushed. And he will not allow himself to be rushed. Because as soon as you're feeling rushed, you're listening to a voice that's not of God. Can you imagine if God were to be like that? Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. Is the universe like that? Not at all. Look at God's universe. Is any of God's creation outside of us in a hurry? How about a tree? Come on, grow! Why aren't you growing? You should be at least 10 feet by now. What's wrong with you? Tree's like, whatever. Doing my thing. We're the only thing in creation that has listened to the voice that says, hurry up. And let me ask you, as we're getting into this discussion together, one-way discussion, albeit, has it gotten us anywhere? How's our marriages doing? How's our time of the Sabbath doing? We're so in a hurry, we've got to hurry up and run to get on a cruise ship to take a vacation from being such in a hurry. And when we're on the cruise ship, we better hurry to take in everything that the cruise ship has, or we feel like we're missing out. And none of that's true. None of it. You think God wants his charity? I don't want my kid being strung out because he's so worried. And God doesn't want us to be like that. That's why Jesus keeps teaching about God. He's so good, you don't have to worry. Because the brother or sister, the sibling of hurry is worry. The only reason you're in a hurry is because you're in a worry. That's true. You'd stop and think every single time you're in a hurry. Why are you in a hurry? Well, if I don't get it, then I'm not going to. And now you're in worry. And all of these voices, we can look at this story and go, oh my gosh, this guy is in a horrible condition, but we're in the exact same condition, just to a much lesser degree. We just got clothes on. You know? And we may not be at a grave, but there's a lot of people that have been driven into solitude. We're so busy that we feel disconnected. No, we're such in a hurry that we feel disconnected. Try this for a moment during this week. Take a day, just a day, and don't listen to anything on the radio. And don't turn on a TV. And for God's sake, don't go on the computer on any social network. And if you do need to talk on the phone, then talk on it. But that's it. And see how uncomfortable it is to have quiet around. For me, it can be a fix. You know, I got to get my fix. And that's how it feels. Maybe not for you. Good. But for the majority, it's a fix. No different going out. What's a fix? A fix is something that I need to feel because I'm uncomfortable feeling what I'm feeling right now. So I'm uncomfortable feeling what I'm feeling right now. I'm going to step outside. I'm going to have a cigarette. And I don't have to feel what I was feeling. And for a moment, I have a habit that makes me feel somewhat at peace. You ask any smoker how they feel about smoking. I hate smoking, but when I'm smoking, I actually feel like I can calm down and for the first time in my day, breathe. Am I not true? I'm so tense, I can't even breathe. Where's my smokes? That's how we do it. And we can't figure out why I'm addicted. I love these things. Oh, I hate these things. I love these. I hate these things. I hate it. Well, it's conflicting because we don't take time to live our lives the way God intended it. We're not to be rushed. And those people that are in our lives that are dominated by that will get angry at us if we don't do what they want to do, because that's what that spirit of rushness does. And that's why in Genesis chapter 3, there was no time for Eve, nor the opportunity, nor even the suggestion that Eve should go talk with God about this possible decision that she was making. She just rushed into it. You rush into anything. Rush into marriage and see how well it works. And now we've got a whole culture that says, "Oh, you like them? You should have sex with them. Just rush into it." That's really worked well for us. Other people raising other people's kids and everything else because we've rushed in and not taken our time to talk with God about it. Just rush. And now that we're in this situation, now we got to rush to get out of it. And now we got to rush to do this. And then each time it gets worse and worse. And so Jesus very calmly says to the man, "Get out. What's your name?" It's a great thing. The demon comes up. "What are you yelling? What do you want with us?" Jesus replies in this manner. "What's your name?" Doesn't shout. What's your name? You ever deal with somebody who is so caught up in whatever it is they're caught up with? You just have to intentionally focus yourself on being calm. Sometimes in our lives, we will surround ourselves with people that have more drama in their lives so that we can focus on fixing their drama so that we don't have to deal with ours. Ooh, that hit home. Because a lot of us can do that. I can do that. And let me tell you, as a pastor, it's easy. Oh, look at all these people that are all messed up. Not me. I'm fine. But and other people's drama can be just as intoxicating as any other drug. Have you noticed that? Drama is an intoxicating experience as long as it's distant. If it's immediate, like within this case, if it's immediate, not so good. But here he comes in and Jesus simply says, "What's your name?" "Legion," he replied, because many demons had gone into him and they begged him repeatedly not to order them to go into the abyss. So they're in this constant state of begging. Finally, a large crowd of pigs, and the demons begged Jesus to let them go into them, and he gave them permission. Fine. You're leaving this guy because you don't have any room. And the key is, and this is the key in all of us, I'm going to conclude it with this. As the Spirit of God, first of all, has space so that we can listen to him. You can't listen to God unless you make space. I don't care how big your family is or how whatever. If you don't make time with your kids, if you don't make time with your spouse, if you don't make time with your friends, if you just simply don't make time, you're never going to listen to them. It's as simple as that. And in the case of this, Jesus listening to God, walking in the very calm presence of God, here is this man who does not have that calmness, and Jesus comes up and simply makes the space. He doesn't argue. How many of us this last week have had arguments in our house. Okay. That's not of God. Now, there's a lot of reasons for them, and I don't need to get into them, because there's a lot of reasons why I get into my argument. But I can almost guarantee you this. The argument that has arisen did not come into being because we were spending time listening to God together or praying with one another. It came more likely than not as a reaction. I'm going to say it again. Arguments happen as a reaction. Somebody says something to you, oh yeah, boom, you're in it. Nobody comes in and says, I have a disagreement with you about this, Lynn. Well, I do too. Maybe we should enter into an argument. That sounds like a good idea. I think we should start to raise our voices. How about you? I concur. I concur. And here's a list of names that I can call you, and here's a list of names that you can call me. Doesn't that sound good? Good. Okay, here we go. Now I'm going to start getting you blankety blank. Oh yeah? That's not how arguments start. This is how an argument starts. I was offended. Hey, what the? And you know how it feels in because you probably said it 100 times. It's conditioned. Conditioned. So we can't go off half-cocked. And this is how Jesus' approach to this man is. He doesn't go off. Calm. What's your name? Go into the pigs. And in ending this, when all those demons went into the pigs, the herd rushed into a steep bank, into the lake, down a steep bank, and was drowned. That's what happens when you listen to those voices. They just get you into a rush. Let me say that again, because that's the whole point of the sermon. What was the title again? Oh, beautiful. I love that name. When pigs fly. It has nothing to do with what I'm teaching, but I like the name of it. When the demons came in, the herd rushed. The herd didn't go down the steep bank, whistling the girl from Ipanema. They just jumped, they rushed. And what I'm trying to say and communicate with us, cherished people of God, if there's one thing you can get from this message today, this next week, don't make it a rule, don't make it a law. Just make it a vision for your life. Ruthlessly root out any voice that tells you to rush. That doesn't mean you're not going to be busy. You got a lot to do. I got a lot to do. We got a lot to do. But ruthlessly root that spirit out. Because it will steal everything that God's trying to bless you with. And now may the peace of God. Sometimes I wish you could see how beautiful you are. Not you, Mike. Please. Oh yeah, will you? No, I wish you could see how beautiful your lives are. You are all so perfect. Perfectly broken. Perfectly struggling. Perfectly overcoming. Perfectly healing. Perfectly changing. Perfect. Let's pray.